I never imagined that my wedding day, the day I had poured 18 months of planning, savings, and hope into, would be the moment I realized the man I loved valued TikTok clout more than our entire relationship. But that's exactly what happened. My fiancé stood at the altar, looked me straight in the eyes, and said no, not because he was scared, not because he didn't love me, but because he wanted to go viral. I'm 31, female, and I'm still stunned that those words even leave my mouth. The ceremony had felt perfect until that second. The music faded beautifully as I walked down the aisle. The guests looked emotional. My dad squeezed my arm gently before letting go. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the beginning of my forever. My fiancé looked nervous in a sweet way, the kind of nervousness that makes your heart melt, the kind that made me believe he was just as overwhelmed by love as I was. But I was wrong. When the officiant asked him the simplest, most important question, "Do you take this woman?" he paused. It wasn't long. Maybe 1, 2 seconds. But it was enough for my breath to hitch. Enough for a strange ripple of tension to spread across the room. I told myself it was nerves. Then he smiled, this odd, playful smile I'd never seen before, and said, "No." Silence. Then another pause. And then he giggled, as if this were all some adorable inside joke we'd rehearsed together. Except I hadn't rehearsed anything. I was the only one not in on it. My eyes followed the subtle movement of his head toward the front row. His best friend's girlfriend stood there with her phone up, recording. Another bridesmaid had her camera out too. That was the moment everything inside me cracked. Not loudly, but quietly, like porcelain splitting under pressure. He wasn't rejecting me, he was performing. For TikTok. And that was the moment something inside me, the part that kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, finally snapped. Minutes later, after the officiant shut the ceremony down, I took the mic, looked at 120 shocked guests, and said, "Joke's on you. Enjoy the singles mixer." He cried outside while we ate his cake, and that was only the beginning. If you had asked me a year ago whether my relationship showed any signs of this kind of implosion, I would have said no, absolutely not. We'd been together 4 years. We had been engaged for 18 months. I truly believed we had built a solid, steady foundation, one made of shared goals, mutual affection, compatible families, and communication that, at the time, I thought was good enough. I was 27 when we met, working as a project coordinator for a design firm. He was 29, a software engineer with an easy smile and a confidence that felt warm rather than arrogant. I remember noticing his hands first, strong, steady, and the way he listened when people talked, nodding with genuine interest. It felt rare. It felt safe. We met at a friend's birthday dinner, squeezed between strangers at a too small table. He offered me the last dumpling. I joked that chivalry wasn't dead. He said, "Only if you let me take you out next week." It was cheesy, but in a sweet, disarming way, I said yes. Our early months were soft and uncomplicated, weekend hikes, homemade pasta attempts, long conversations on his couch where we talked about our dreams. He wanted a family someday. I did too. We made fun of each other's cooking. We shared Spotify playlists. He once stayed up until 3 a.m., helping me finish a presentation I'd been panicking over. I remember thinking, this is my person. But there were small things, little flickers, that I dismissed far too easily. He loved social media, loved it, not in a casual, I post a vacation photo twice a year way. It was a hobby, then a habit, then a priority. He wasn't famous or anything. Around 15,000 followers, enough to feed the ego, but not enough to be a career. He posted frequently, day-in-the-life videos, gym clips, pranks on friends, couples moments, all packaged neatly for strangers. I told myself it was harmless. People have hobbies. Mine was interior design blogs and reading thrillers. His was content creation. But as our relationship deepened, I started noticing a shift. He became obsessed with aesthetic. If we went on dates, he wanted pictures first. If we cooked together, he'd position the phone just so to capture the perfect angle of us sprinkling Parmesan. He once made me reshoot a video of us hugging because my hair didn't fall right. It was annoying, yes, but not enough to be a breaking point. I kept reminding myself, he isn't hurting anyone. He just likes documenting things. When he proposed, it was romantic. Down on one knee at the botanical gardens, golden hour lighting the whole world in soft amber tones. I cried. People clapped. The moment felt sincere. He didn't post the proposal until 3 weeks later, claiming he wanted to edit it perfectly. At the time, I found that endearing. Now I see it differently. His family welcomed me politely, if not warmly. His mother always had a way of making backhanded compliments sound like kindness. "You're very independent," she told me once. "Men like my son prefer someone who lets them lead." His father was quiet, the type who observed more than he spoke. His sister adored social media too, and often pressured me to play along more in their family videos. My family, on the other hand, loved him instantly. My mom thought he was charming. My dad respected his career drive. They saw the highlight reel, what he presented so well. They didn't see the moments where he snapped at me for ruining a shot or acted distant because a video didn't perform well. And I didn't tell them, because I didn't want to believe those cracks meant anything. Looking back carefully, painfully, I can trace every thread that eventually led to the aisle. But at the time, I thought we were fine. I thought all relationships had quirks. I thought wedding stress made everyone strange. I didn't know I was standing on a fault line that would split wide open the moment he saw a camera opportunity more exciting than the idea of committing to me. The first real cracks started showing about a year before the wedding. Small moments, strange shifts in his behavior that I kept brushing aside because love makes you optimistic, maybe even a little delusional. I kept telling myself, he's stressed, he's excited, he's passionate about his hobby. But deep down, something was beginning to whisper, pay attention. It began subtly. Whenever something emotional happened, good or bad, his first reaction wasn't to talk to me. It was to reach for his phone. One night, after a long argument about finances, he suddenly turned the camera on us and said, "When couples fight but still love each other," before wrapping his arm around me like nothing had happened. My eyes were still red, my voice was still shaking, but he wanted a clip. I remember asking quietly, "Can we not do this right now?" He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's relatable content, babe. People love authenticity." Authenticity. That word slowly began to mean whatever gets attention, not what was real. Then came the wedding planning. At first, we were a team. Pinterest boards, venue tours, tasting menus. But very quickly, the priority shifted. Everything had to be aesthetic. Everything had to be viral potential. Everything had to be filmed. I suggested a small, intimate ceremony. He insisted it needed to be bigger. "Big weddings perform better," he said. "You don't want it to flop, right?" Flop, as if our marriage were a product launch. A month later, he asked if I would consider wearing a specific dress style because it photographed well. I told him gently that I wanted to choose something that made me feel beautiful. He responded with, "Sure, but be open-minded. It's our content, too." Our content. I felt something tighten in my chest. His friends weren't helping. His best man would constantly pitch video ideas for the wedding. Funny vows, a prank kiss fake-out, a staged cold feet moment. They spoke about our ceremony as if it were a film set. At first, I laughed it off, thinking they weren't serious. But every time we said no, they'd exchange looks like we were killing their creativity. Even his sister joined in. OMG, imagine if you pretended to reject him and then said yes dramatically. It would go so viral. I told her gently that weddings were meaningful, sacred moments, not skits. She rolled her eyes. "Ugh, you're so traditional." Maybe I was. Maybe I still am, but I didn't think wanting sincerity was outdated. The more wedding planning went on, the more isolated I felt. I'd look around at meetings, venue coordinators, florists, photographers, and realize they were talking to him more than me. Because he had visions, he had angles, he had concepts. Me? I just wanted to marry someone who loved me more than he loved an audience. But every time I tried to bring it up, he brushed it away. "You're overthinking." "It's normal. Everyone documents their weddings now. You should appreciate that I'm putting effort into making it special." Every argument ended with me questioning myself. Am I being too sensitive, too demanding, not supportive enough? But then came the engagement photo shoot. What should have been a joyful memory turned into a 3-hour ordeal of retakes, repositioning, fixing lighting, adjusting my hair, repeating the same kiss until it looked natural enough. My cheeks hurt from smiling. At one point, my fiancé muttered, "Can you not blink so much? It ruins the shot." I remember standing there in my dress, the sun setting, thinking, This doesn't feel like love. This feels like a performance I never auditioned for. Still, I stayed. Still, I convinced myself it was just wedding stress. Still, I hoped it would get better once the big day arrived. But of course, it didn't. The seeds of conflict were already rooted too deeply. I just didn't know yet that they would bloom in the most painful way imaginable, right at the altar, under the eyes of everyone we knew. The morning of the wedding felt almost dreamlike, too soft, too gentle, too perfect in the way dangerous things often are. My dress hung near the window, catching the early light. My bouquet breathed out its scent of peonies and eucalyptus, and my bridesmaids fluttered around me like nervous birds. I remember staring at myself in the mirror, wondering if this was what happiness was supposed to look like: fragile, glowing, hopeful. For a brief moment, I let myself believe all the stress would fade the moment we said, "I do." That marriage would settle him. That commitment would ground us. That love, our love, was enough. I didn't know how wrong I was. When the ceremony began, my father offered his arm and whispered, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'm ready." As we stepped into the venue, the music swelled. Guests rose. Cameras stayed respectfully lowered. My heart thudded in my chest, not with fear, but with the overwhelming sense of finally. I looked up and saw my fiancé waiting at the altar. His eyes shimmered, his lips curved into a tender smile, and despite every red flag leading up to this day, I felt something warm spread through me. He loves me, I told myself. He wouldn't ruin this. The officiant guided us through readings and vows. My hands trembled as I spoke mine, voice unsteady with emotion. When he read his, he looked almost shy, soft around the edges. For the first time in months, I felt us again, the version of us I'd fallen in love with. Then came the moment, the question that should have tied our lives together. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" A hush fell over the room. He looked at me. He looked at the officiant. And then, barely, but undeniably, he glanced toward the crowd. I followed the movement of his eyes. His best friend was holding up his phone, already recording. A few seats down, another groomsman had his camera lifted too. Their faces were bright with expectation, waiting for the punchline, the reveal, the dramatic, just kidding moment they clearly expected him to deliver. My stomach tightened, my pulse stuttered. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He turned back to me and smiled, not lovingly, not nervously, but mischievously, playfully, almost theatrically. Then he said it. No, not a whisper, not confusion. A clear, rehearsed, confident no. A collective gasp rose through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Someone's chair scraped against the floor. My breath collapsed in on itself. The officiant blinked, startled. "I'm sorry, could you repeat your answer?" My fiancé laughed. Actually laughed. A light, boyish giggle like this was all adorable. I said no. My vision tunneled. The world narrowed to his smirking face and the phones pointed at us. A ringing filled my ears as humiliation crawled like fire up my neck. This wasn't a breakdown. This wasn't fear. This was a performance. A TikTok trend. A prank. At our wedding. The officiant's voice sharpened. "Sir, if you are not prepared to take this ceremony seriously, I cannot continue." Panic flickered across my fiancé's face. No, wait, it's a joke. Come on, it's a trend." I was going to say yes after. Look it up, it's funny. The officiant closed his book with finality. "Marriage is not a joke. I will not participate in this." The room erupted in whispers. His mother paled. His father swore under his breath. My bridesmaids stared at me helplessly, not sure whether to step forward or stay still. My fiancé turned to me, hands slightly raised. "Baby, say something. Tell them it's fine. Help me out here." Something inside me went perfectly still. Cold, calm, unshakable. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't shock. It was clarity. I stepped back. Then I walked to the DJ booth. I took the microphone. "Everyone," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Apparently that was a TikTok prank. My fiancé decided our wedding was the perfect place to create content. Gasps, murmurs. "Since the ceremony has been called off," I continued, "please enjoy the open bar, the food, and the venue. Consider this a singles mixer. No point letting $47,000 go to waste." A stunned silence followed, then a ripple of laughter, disbelief, applause. I looked directly at him. "You wanted viral content? There you go." His face drained of all color. He lunged for the mic. "Stop! Seriously, stop! You're being dramatic." I stepped back. DJ, I said, play something fun. Music blasted. Guests hesitated, then slowly made their way toward the bar and buffet. People began dancing, eating, talking, awkwardly at first, then almost joyfully. He stormed outside, and while he cried on the steps, 120 guests sliced into the wedding cake I had spent weeks designing, raised their glasses, and toasted to dodging bullets. It wasn't the wedding I planned, but it was the moment I finally saw him clearly. I don't know what I expected the aftermath to be. Maybe a few awkward apologies, some quiet reconciliation. But what happened next was far messier, far more revealing than I could have imagined. The first few minutes felt like everything was moving in slow motion. The DJ continued to play upbeat songs, but the energy in the room had shifted. Some guests whispered, some laughed, uncomfortably. Some just stood there, unsure of what to do next. I was surrounded by people, friends, family, strangers, but I felt utterly alone. I kept replaying the moment in my head. His voice, his laugh, that sickening thrill in his eyes when he pranked me. This wasn't just a failed wedding. It was a failure of trust, a failure of love. My maid of honor came up to me, a drink in her hand, trying to offer me some comfort. You're okay, right? She sounded unsure, like she wasn't even sure what to say. I nodded stiffly. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. I wasn't even close to fine. I had no idea what was happening. What was I supposed to do now? I looked around. My mom was at the bar, her face flushed with anger as she knocked back what looked like her third shot of whiskey. Her arms were crossed over her chest, and her lips were pressed together in that tight line I recognized too well. Her disapproval was so obvious it felt like a weight on my chest. She wanted to comfort me. She wanted to be angry too. But mostly, she just didn't know what to do either. His parents, on the other hand, were standing by the entrance, looking like they had been hit by a freight train. His mother was fidgeting with her dress, her face pale as she caught my eye, her mouth moving but no words coming out. His father, who had always been so reserved, looked like he might actually speak up, but didn't. He just stared at the floor, avoiding my gaze like I wasn't even there. His friends, the ones who had been egging him on with the idea of content creation, had all gathered together in small huddles. They had the audacity to look uncomfortable, but not ashamed. They were still holding their phones out, capturing the aftermath like this was some kind of reality show. That's when I felt it, the isolation. It wasn't just the awkward silence or the stares, it was the quiet realization that I had spent years, months, weeks, building a life with someone who could, at the drop of a hat, strip away every ounce of respect, every ounce of dignity, just to entertain an audience. A laugh bubbled in my chest, though it didn't feel like joy. It felt more like a release of pent-up frustration, like the air escaping from a balloon that had been overfilled for too long. His best man, who had been standing near the front, took his phone down and walked up to me. His face was a mixture of confusion and guilt. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, but the apology sounded rehearsed, hollow. "I didn't know he was going to." He stopped himself. I glanced at him, then away, swallowing the sharp bitterness rising in my throat. I didn't need his apology. I needed someone to take responsibility for what had just been done to me. I turned back to the bar where my mom was now talking to my dad, who had just arrived. He looked as stunned as the rest of us, his face pale as he spoke to her. His eyes flicked to me, his lips pressing into a tight line of concern. "You okay?" he asked quietly, stepping closer. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I was not okay. I was absolutely, completely, and utterly not okay. The man I had trusted, the man I thought I was going to spend my life with, had just humiliated me in front of everyone I knew, and he wasn't even sorry about it. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him pacing outside the venue, his back to me as he threw his hands up in frustration. The sobs were muffled by the distance, but I could see his shoulders shaking. My heart twisted, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. The next few minutes felt like an eternity as I tried to process what had just happened. My thoughts scrambled, racing through memories of the past few years. All the moments I had ignored, all the moments I had made excuses for him, blaming stress or work or anything but the truth. I had let myself believe in a future with him, even though all along his real passion had been the one thing that could never include me. I had been too blind to see it, and now I had to deal with the consequences. The days following the wedding passed in a blur of forced smiles and fake pleasantries. I couldn't bring myself to call it what it truly was, a disaster, but that's exactly what it felt like, and it was only getting worse. The first sign that things weren't going to just blow over came in the form of a phone call from his mother. Her voice was tight, as though she was about to explode, but she was holding it together with a thin thread of politeness. "You need to understand, honey, that you've ruined this family's reputation. Your actions were uncalled for." Her voice faltered, but the message remained clear. It wasn't about the humiliation I'd just endured. It was about how she felt, how her son felt. "We've paid for everything, the venue, the catering, the cake, and you—" She didn't even finish the sentence, the anger too thick in her throat. "You humiliated him in front of everyone." My eyes burned with unshed tears. My wedding had been hijacked by a social media prank, and now I was the one being blamed for the fallout. "I did not humiliate anyone," I replied, my voice low and steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "Your son did that to me, and you're defending him?" There was a long pause before she spoke again, the words sharp and measured. "You need to come to your senses. I suggest you fix this, or we'll have to take legal action." The call ended abruptly. The silence that followed felt suffocating. That wasn't the only phone call I received. My dad, who had tried to stay neutral during the whole ordeal, pulled me aside the next day. His face was grim, the kind of expression I'd seen only when there was trouble ahead. "Sweetheart, your mother's been talking to his family," he said quietly, his voice a little more weary than usual. "They're planning to sue you for ruining the wedding. They want their money back. Everything they put into it. The venue, the catering, the cake. I'm sure they'll include the photographer and the flowers too." I couldn't believe it, the audacity of it all. They were actually blaming me for everything, for his joke, for the disaster he created. "They said I should have handled it better," I said bitterly, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. "They think I should have laughed it off, gone along with it. But how could I? How could I ever laugh at what he did to me?" My father's face tightened, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You don't have to explain yourself, honey. We know what happened. But we need to be careful here. They're not going to let this go, and they've got money and influence on their side." That was the moment the weight of the situation really sank in. This wasn't just about me and him anymore. It wasn't about a wedding gone wrong. This was becoming a war, and I was in the middle of it. The next day, I received a letter from their lawyer. It was a formal demand for me to reimburse them for the entire wedding, including the venue, catering, and all the other expenses they'd incurred. They were suing me for emotional distress, claiming that my actions at the ceremony had humiliated their son and caused them irreparable damage. I couldn't stop laughing when I read it. It wasn't a laugh of amusement, but one of disbelief. This couldn't be real, but it was, and they weren't backing down. I called my lawyer, the one who had helped me with minor legal matters in the past. She was equally shocked, but said something that chilled me to my core. "They're not going to let this go. They'll make your life miserable with this lawsuit, but we have options. We can countersue for breach of contract. You could argue that their son's actions rendered the ceremony impossible to continue." At that point, all I could do was nod. I felt like I was sinking deeper into this nightmare, and I had no idea how to stop it. The worst part? His friends were siding with him too, the ones who had cheered him on during the whole prank, who had recorded everything like it was some kind of reality show, now stood by him, offering him sympathy and support. None of them were standing by me. None of them were taking my side. And his best man, the one who had been so close to him, the one who had participated in setting everything up? He came to me a week later, his expression guilty, but his words still supportive of him. "I didn't know he was going to go that far," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But he really felt like it was just supposed to be a funny moment, you know? I think he honestly thought you'd just laugh it off. He didn't mean to hurt you, but I think he's struggling with all the pressure from the wedding. The whole thing was just too much for him." Struggling with pressure? I wanted to scream. He had ruined our wedding, our future, and my dignity for what? A few more followers? A viral video? "I don't care what he thought," I replied coldly. "He humiliated me, and now I have to deal with the fallout." "I'm sorry," he said again, and it sounded so empty. "But he's my friend, you know? I'm just trying to help him through this." I turned away from him, the bitterness in my mouth nearly choking me. It wasn't just a prank anymore. It wasn't even just a broken engagement. This was a full-blown catastrophe, and I was the one left holding the pieces. The days after the lawsuit began felt like a blur, like I was living in a fog. I couldn't seem to focus on anything, couldn't shake the constant anxiety gnawing at the edges of my mind. The humiliation at the altar, the calls from his family, the legal threats. It was too much, too soon, and yet it kept coming. I woke up each morning with a weight in my chest. Every email, every call, every letter from their lawyer, it felt like a new punch, and I couldn't catch my breath long enough to recover from the last one. I tried to go through the motions, work, meals, pretending to be present for my family, but all of it felt like a hollow performance. I had always been strong. I prided myself on being level-headed, calm under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't just about a wedding ruined by a prank. This was about my entire life being dragged through the mud, my trust shattered, and the man I had once loved completely gone, replaced by someone who could destroy me for his own amusement without a second thought. My mom kept telling me to focus on healing, to let the legal process play out, but every time I picked up the phone, every time I spoke to my lawyer, it felt like I was drowning deeper. The truth was, I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to fix me. I spent hours at night lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the quiet pressing down on me like a physical weight. The flashes of the wedding played on an endless loop in my head, his smile, the pause, the no that changed everything. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't get the image of his face out of my mind. I even tried to talk to friends about it, people who had been close to us, people I thought would have my back. But the truth was, they didn't understand. No one could really understand unless they had lived through it. They didn't get the sense of betrayal, the quiet heartbreak that crept up behind my anger. One night, my dad came into my room after dinner, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something I'd never seen before, concern. He sat at the edge of my bed, rubbing his hands together nervously, and looked at me with a helpless expression. "How are you holding up, honey?" he asked quietly. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." He didn't buy it, of course. He never did. He knew me too well. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "I know it's hard. I know this is unfair. But you have to ask yourself, are you going to let this destroy you? Because that's what it feels like right now. You've been knocked down, and I know it feels like there's no way back up, but you're strong and you have options. You always have options." I could feel the tears start to sting behind my eyes, but I swallowed them back. I didn't want to cry in front of him. I didn't want to seem weak. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know how to forgive him." He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to forgive him. Not yet. Not unless you're ready. But you do have to decide what's more important, what he did to you or what you do with it. He can't control your future anymore, honey. Don't let him." His words hung in the air like a lifeline, but it didn't feel like enough. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit something. I wanted to feel something other than the numb, suffocating sorrow that was consuming me from the inside. The next few days were a blur of meetings, legal consultations, and more phone calls from his family. They were relentless. His mother sent another email demanding that I meet them in person, stating that they were trying to work things out and that I was making everything worse by refusing to talk. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I had nothing left to say. Everything I had said, every attempt to explain, had been ignored, twisted, and used against me. It didn't matter what I said anymore. I was done. But even as I stood my ground, something inside me began to crack. The emotional toll of it all started seeping in. I had become someone I didn't recognize, a shell of the woman who had walked down the aisle with so much hope, so much belief in the future. Now I was hollow, empty, just going through the motions, waiting for something to change. One night, after yet another stressful phone call with my lawyer, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, staring at my reflection. I looked like a stranger. The woman in the mirror was pale, tired, her eyes dull from lack of sleep, the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. "I'm not this person," I whispered to myself. "I'm not the one who lets this destroy me." It felt like a small spark, a tiny flicker of something deep inside me, a promise to myself. A promise that no matter how much he had taken from me, no matter how much his betrayal had shattered my sense of self, I would rebuild. I would find a way to stand up again. It wouldn't happen overnight. The pain was too fresh, the wounds too deep. But in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let this be the end of me. I walked away from the mirror and began to plan. It wasn't the first time I'd stood up for myself. but it was the first time I'd done it for myself, without caring about how anyone else would feel about it. No more appeasing, no more excuses. I was tired of letting others dictate my narrative. I was tired of letting the humiliation control me. I spent days mulling over what had happened, replaying the moments in my head. But instead of succumbing to the anger and pain, something shifted inside me. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a let it go moment. No, it was far more powerful. It was an understanding. I had to own this moment. I couldn't keep letting his actions define me. I couldn't let my life be hijacked by his need for validation and clout. The change didn't come all at once. It started with small steps. I called my lawyer and began to prepare my counterclaim. They thought they could intimidate me, break me down with their legal threats. But they didn't realize that my resolve had already hardened. If they thought I was going to give up, they had another thing coming. I started gathering evidence. I remembered how, in the heat of everything, I had forgotten to ask for the ceremony footage. But my maid of honor had it. She'd been recording on her phone when everything fell apart. She had captured the moment the officiant shut down the ceremony, the panic in my ex's eyes, as he realized there was no going back. And most importantly, she had filmed his immediate response to me calling it off and taking the mic. I knew it wasn't enough to just rely on what had happened during the ceremony. I needed to show that his behavior wasn't just a one-off incident. It was a pattern. I wanted to prove that he had used me, manipulated me, and reduced our entire relationship to a public spectacle for his own gain. I sent out emails, reached out to mutual friends, and even connected with one of his close friends who had always been supportive of our relationship. One night, after weeks of feeling suffocated, I found myself calling him. He had been present at the wedding, a part of the group that had laughed and cheered during the prank, and I hadn't spoken to him since everything happened. When he responded, I didn't know what to expect, but what I got was honesty, a warning. "I saw what happened at your wedding," he said. "He did the same thing to me once, back when we were younger. It was for content, just like this. He doesn't see the world any other way. I'm sorry." His words were blunt, but they were also the truth. He told me everything I needed to hear, including what I'd been too blind to see. My ex had always treated our relationship like a performance, like a series of curated moments meant to please an audience. The truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. Still, his apology didn't make things easier. It didn't fix what had happened. But it gave me the courage to move forward, to do what I knew I needed to do, what I had been avoiding for so long. The turning point came when I realized something critical. I didn't need to win this battle. I didn't need to defeat him or make him pay. What I needed was to find my peace, and the only way to do that was to reclaim my power. I drafted my response, carefully choosing my words. I wouldn't apologize for his actions. I wouldn't justify my behavior, my decision to stand up for myself. I didn't care if it made me look petty or vengeful in their eyes. I just needed to say it, to put it out there. To his parents, I wrote, "You cannot ask me to forgive what was done to me. You cannot demand I fix something that your son broke. If you want to keep fighting me, I'll fight back, but you won't win. I won't let you make me the villain in this story." I sent it, not expecting anything back, but needing to do it for myself. As I sat there, staring at my computer screen, I realized that my decision to fight wasn't out of anger. It wasn't because I wanted revenge. It was because I had finally accepted that I deserved more than to be his punchline. The next day, I took the first real step toward regaining control of my life. I picked up the phone and called the venue. I explained the situation and, to my surprise, the manager, who had witnessed the chaos, offered me a credit for a future event. It wasn't much, but it felt like the first small victory I'd had in weeks. It was a reminder that I still had power over my future. In that moment, I understood. I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for myself, for the person I wanted to become, not the person he had tried to turn me into. And that was the most powerful realization of all. The fallout came quickly, faster than I could have prepared for, and far more destructive than I imagined. But this time, it wasn't just about me. It wasn't about the wedding, or the prank, or even his family's demands. This was about everyone knowing the truth, and the consequences that followed. The first blow came in the form of an email. It was from his mother. Her tone was just as condescending as it had been before, but this time there was no sugarcoating. She demanded that I pay for the full wedding costs, including the venue, catering, and the photographer's fees. According to her, I had ruined her son's dream day and owed them for the disaster I had caused. The audacity. I had kept my composure when I responded, but my fingers shook with rage as I typed. I wasn't going to let them gaslight me into thinking I was the one at fault. I didn't owe them a single penny. I explained once more that it was their son who had ruined everything, and that if they chose to pursue legal action, I would fight back. But what really shocked me wasn't the email. It wasn't the demands for money or the insults. It was how quickly they turned on me. His family, the people who had once embraced me, like I was one of their own, were now treating me like the villain. They weren't trying to understand my side. They didn't care about my hurt, my humiliation, or my heartbreak. All they saw was that I had ruined their perfect, well-funded event, and they couldn't handle that. The pressure from them started to bleed into every part of my life. Friends who had been acquaintances before the wedding began to side with them, posting comments on social media about how I was overreacting and that I should just forgive him. Others told me to move on and that this was just one of those things. But how could I move on when everything I had trusted, everything I thought was real, had been shattered in front of me? The next major blow came when the story hit social media. His best man's girlfriend, the one who had recorded everything, posted a short clip of the wedding, but she cut it off right before I took the mic. The video was titled "Wedding Prank Gone Wrong" with a laughing emoji. It went viral. The comments were pouring in within hours. At first, people sided with him. The comments were full of support for the hilarious prank. But as the video gained traction, some guests who had actually been there started chiming in. They corrected the narrative. They shared the truth, the whole truth, about how everything had fallen apart, how the officiant refused to continue, and how my fiancé had humiliated me on the most important day of my life. The tide started to shift. And then came the backlash. The video was taken down, but the damage was already done. Screenshots had already been shared, and the narrative about the wedding prank began to unravel. The comments went from, "She's overreacting," to, "What kind of man does that to his fiancé?" People started questioning the idea of content creation at the expense of someone else's dignity. People started questioning him. The worst part was how his own friends reacted. They stopped contacting me. Some tried to apologize, but most were just too cowardly to face the truth. I was left alone to deal with the emotional wreckage while they tried to protect their own reputations. And his best man, the one who had been so close to him, the one who had participated in setting everything up, he came to me a week later, his expression guilty, but his words still supportive of him. "I didn't know he was going to go that far," he said, running a hand through his hair, "but he really felt like it was just supposed to be a funny moment, you know? I think he honestly thought you'd just laugh it off. He didn't mean to hurt you, but I think he's struggling with all the pressure from the wedding. The whole thing was just too much for him." Struggling with pressure? I wanted to scream. He had ruined our wedding, our future, and my dignity for what? A few more followers? A viral video? "I don't care what he thought," I replied coldly. "He humiliated me, and now I have to deal with the fallout." "I'm sorry," he said again, and it sounded so empty. "But he's my friend, you know. I'm just trying to help him through this." I turned away from him, the bitterness in my mouth nearly choking me. It wasn't just a prank anymore. It wasn't even just a broken engagement. This was a full-blown catastrophe, and I was the one left holding the pieces. In the weeks that followed, I started to reclaim my life, piece by piece. The anger, the shame, the crushing weight of everything that had happened. It was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But little by little, I began to feel something else: strength. I didn't go back to the life I had before. The woman I was before was gone, shattered and rebuilt from the ruins of a relationship I thought I understood. But I was beginning to see that wasn't a bad thing. I learned how to set boundaries with the people who had once been close to me. His family? They didn't matter anymore. They had made it clear where their loyalty lay, and I was done trying to fit into their version of reality. They wanted me to apologize for their son's actions. That was never going to happen. I wasn't going to let them twist the truth and put the blame on me. I cut ties with the people who had abandoned me in my time of need, the friends who took his side, who said I was overreacting. And I stopped caring about social media. I didn't need the validation of strangers, or even friends who didn't understand what I had been through. In the midst of all this, I received a letter from the venue offering me a credit for a future event, acknowledging the chaos of the wedding day. It wasn't a huge win, but it was something. A small reminder that I still had control. I wasn't completely powerless, and I could still find ways to move forward. One afternoon, after everything had settled down, I stood in front of the mirror again, just like I had in the days following the wedding. This time I saw someone different, someone stronger, someone who had survived. I wasn't just looking at the woman who had been humiliated in front of everyone. I was looking at the woman who had taken that humiliation, that heartbreak, and used it to rebuild herself. And then, finally, I realized something crucial. I had chosen myself. I had decided that no one, no matter how much they tried to tear me down, could define my worth. He had tried to break me with his actions, with his humiliation, but in the end, it was his actions that broke him, not me. I let go of the anger. I let go of the bitterness. Not for him, but for me. Because the only way to move forward was to stop carrying the weight of his choices with me. I had learned my lesson. Love is never about validation or performance. Love is about trust, respect, and authenticity. Anything less than that doesn't deserve your time, your heart, or your energy. As I looked ahead, I knew the road wouldn't always be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past threatened to crush me again. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my future. I was ready to start over, on my own terms.